Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and this is an episode of It Came From the Network. Now on It Came From the Network we review the weird, the wild, the campy, and sometimes just bad things that you could find on the WWE Network. This review comes by suggestion of a friend of ours, Ryan Hadley, and it is New Blood Rising from WCW. Let's jump right into the show. First match of the night, we have a ladder match between 3 Count and the Young Dragons. A pretty impressive match. A good way to start the show. Some young high flyers, Shane Helms, Gregory Helms, who would go on to be the Hurricane, Shannon Moore. You got Jimmy Yang and Evan Craig. This was 1 3 Count. Jimmy Wang Yang on the other side with Jamie Noble and Kaz Hayashi as the Young Dragons. Put on a decent match. They had to climb to the top to get a record contract and a gold record for 3 Count. If the Young Dragons got it, 3 Count never would record again. If 3 Count got it, they got to record again. Something silly like that. Russo era stuff. 3 Count picks up the win with help from their manager at the time, Tank Abbott. Fun match and a good way to start the show. Next up, we see the Filthy Animals trying to coerce the Cat into letting them referee a match that happens later. Part of their deal is in the next match, they'll help the Cat beat the Great Muta, which we see come in the ring. It wasn't really a great match. Tigress, who was part of the Filthy Animals, helps with a distraction. Cat picks up the win. He'll let them be referees in the match later on, which we'll mention when we get there. But the match itself kind of didn't hit on all cylinders. The Cat, for as entertaining and as much as the gimmick was fun and how charismatic he was, he couldn't hang in the ring with a ring technician and an expert at the level of the Great Muta. And it showed here. Next up, we have Positively Canyon versus Buff Bagwell in the Judy Bagwell on the pole match. Now this, folks, if you heard that before, you probably heard it in a negative connotation. This is one of the things that are pointed to as a low point in the Vince Russo booking at WCW. You have stuff he loved to do on the pole matches. This was actually, she was on the forklift. He loved to do overly gimmick stuff. He loved to take great wrestlers like Canyon. Canyon was a decent wrestler, had good gimmick between the Jersey Triad stuff and the Mortis stuff and the stuff he did with Raven. I thought he had a good gimmick. This was him in an imposter DDP role, which the backstory was, it all had to do with the Ready to Rumble movie and him helping out a lot in the movie. And you get my drift. But anyway, this is it's an okay match, weird stipulation. Buff picks up the win, wins his mother back, lowers her from the forklift. If you would have took out the overly goofy stuff, got away from the Judy Bagwell on the pole part, probably a serviceable match, a good match to have on the pay-per-view. However, you throw that crap on top of it, and it's basically, let's say you got a hamburger. A hamburger's pretty good. Everybody likes hamburger. Then you take and you put sardines on top. Which, okay, some people might like that. So now you got your hamburger with sardines. And then you take on top of the sardines, you throw, I don't know, something random and weird like chocolate syrup. Now you got a hamburger with sardines and chocolate syrup. Would have been just fine to leave the hamburger alone. Kind of the same thing here. You let the Canyon and Buff Bagwell have a good match, leave it alone. If you want to do something gimmicky, make it an I Quit match, make it a no holds barred match, something to that effect, not the silliness that we see here. But anyway, moving on. The next match is the actual match that the Filthy Animals all got to referee. Disco in the ring, the other four were outside, Rey Mysterio, Juventud, Conan was on commentary, Tigress, and Psychosis. And we have the Misfits in action, which was Lash LaRue and Hugh Morris representing Jindrak and O'Hare. Misfits in action going up against Jindrak and Hare. O'Hare going up against Palumbo and Stasiak, going up against Chronic for the WCW Tag Team Championships. The Filthy Animals seem to want anybody but Chronic to win, seeing as they're going to get a rematch for the tag titles. It becomes a large clusterfuck and a shit match, and nothing really good happens. Disco gets bumped at some point. Chavo Guerrero, who's part of the Misfits of Action as Lieutenant Loco, runs down, pulls off the referee shirt, puts it on himself, and counts the pin for Chronic. Which makes absolutely no sense, because why is he helping out Chronic when he has members of his own team in the match? I don't know. Again, more Russo booking, more silliness. Could have easily eliminated 2 or 3 of the tag teams in this and had a solid match. Jindrak and O'Hare versus Chronic match. Misfits in Action versus Chronic. Palumbo and Stasiak versus Chronic. All on their own would have been a much better match than this clusterfuck. It was a car wreck. It was putting 10 people in the ring with 5 refs, and it didn't work so well. Next up, we have Shane Douglas versus Billy Kidman. This was coming off of their Viagra on a pole match, and then continuing that feud. This was a strap match. It was an okay match. I enjoyed it. It was fun. However, just, again, overly gimmicked. Too much outside going on. You like Douglas, who was one of the great heels of the 1990s, and Billy Kidman, a very underrated talent, but who could go. You let them have a regular match, and they're going to put on a good show. Not that they didn't here, which was weird because the win was a pinfall, unlike any other strap match. After the match, Douglas attacks Kidman, is choking him, which we see Big Vito run down to make the save, who's followed by Reno, and then they brawl, and that is that. Much like everything else, it has to have a clusterfuck, shitty ending because, of course, Vince Russo's booking this. Next up, we have Major Guns versus Mrs. Hancock, who would become Stacy Keibler, in a ROTC match, which stood for Rip Off the Camouflage. Basically, your lingerie match, your tuxedo match, where the goal is to rip off the other person's clothes. However, they added a mud pit that they had to go wrestle in after that was done. I don't understand. Again, overly gimmicked. 2 beautiful women. Match was okay. They get to the mud. They start doing their thing, and I know why it's there. It's a TNA factor, not TNA wrestling, tits and ass factor. Major Guns picks up the win when Miss Hancock is in charge, and all of a sudden she doubles over in pain, holding her belly. This is the beginning of her pregnancy angle with David Flair, which would go absolutely nowhere and make absolutely no sense. David Flair comes running out to make sure she's okay. Major Guns pins her before he does so. Again, begins the whole pregnancy angle, which is another shitty story for another shitty day. Next up, we have Sting versus the Demon, who, if you're not familiar with, was dressed up like Gene Simmons from Kiss. They tried to do a crossover where Kiss would have Kiss wrestlers. They did a concert on Nitro, and this was the first one. There was supposed to be all 4, 1 for each member of Kiss. However, it didn't go over well. Who would have thunk it? You know, sure, there's some crossover there with Kiss fans and wrestling fans, but do Kiss fans want to see a Kiss character wrestle, and do wrestling fans want to see a Kiss character wrestle? Judging by how well this went over, no. It would have been better for Kiss to put their support behind an existing wrestler, maybe just do the theme song for a guy, which a lot of fans would have loved from both genres. You know, let's say, guys on the roster at the time, let's say Chronic. Chronic with a Kiss song would have fit them perfectly. Scott Steiner with a Kiss song. You know, there's a bunch of guys they could have given just a Kiss theme song and it would have went over better than this. Convoluted by the fact that the Demon is in a group with Vampiro and Muta that's called the Dark Carnival, which has ties to the Insane Clown Posse. Just a weird thing. Sting picks up the win in about 2 minutes over the Demon. Not a very impressive match. Afterwards, Vampiro and Muta come out and attack Sting, which brings out Chronic to make the save, which Chronic challenges Vampiro and Muta to a tag team title match later on. Not only did they have to wrestle 3 teams earlier, now they're going to have to wrestle a 4th later. Again, overly booked, overly gimmicked. You do the 2-minute King Sting Demon match, get it out of the way. And it's weird that you got a guy like Sting who's barely used on the show, and he's one of your biggest stars. I don't know. Just makes no sense to me. Next up, we have Mike Awesome versus Lance Storm for the Canadian Heavyweight Championship, which is actually the U.S. title. This is when Lance Storm had won the Hardcore title, the Cruiserweight title, and the U.S. title, and renamed them all Canadian names. This one was going to be special referee enforcer of the rules. Jacques Rizzo would be involved. We see this gimmick worked. Sometimes the gimmick helped the match. On this one it did. We see Mike Awesome get a pin. However, Jacques Rizzo waves it off and says, no, you can't. In Canadian rules, you go to 5, not 3. So the match continues. Then we see Mike Awesome get a submission win, which Jacques Rizzo says, no, you can't win by... After the submission, he has to 10 to get up, which Storm does. Match continues. Then at one point, both wrestlers are down. The referee goes over to Jacques Rizzo, who says the first person to make it to their feet before the 10 count wins. The Jacques and the referee start counting. The referee starts counting Storm. Jacques starts counting Awesome. Awesome starts to get up, and Jacques Rizzo decks him, knocking him back down. Lance Storm makes it up first, wins the match, much to the Canadian crowd's fan. I forgot to mention this was in Canada. I believe it was Vancouver, British Columbia. Lance Storm picks up the win. Afterwards, we see Bret Hart come down, which we didn't know if he was going to challenge Storm and Rizzo or if he was on their side. He only comes out to celebrate with them. Makes a little bit of sense. Kind of ties into his WWE anti-American gimmick. And it was a good match, and it was fun, and the gimmick worked. Sometimes the gimmick worked, sometimes it was crap, like we've seen multiple times already in the show. Next up, we have Vampiro and Muta versus Chronic for the Tag Team Championship. A decent match. Chronic, while being big and lumbering guys, were actually pretty decent at what they did. They had a good look to them. They had a good tag team chemistry. Vampiro and Muta as well. Vamp and Muta pick up the win when the Harris brothers come through the crowd and attack Chronic. The Harris brothers hadn't been on TV for a while, and they were a favorite of Vince Russo. He liked to use them a lot. And they were another big, bruising tag team that had good chemistry with each other and looked good on TV and looked like they were badasses, which helps go far, and especially at the time in the late 90s, early 2000s, being a big muscular guy was what people expected of wrestlers, and this was that. Next up, we have a 3-way match for the number 1 contendership. We have Kevin Nash versus Bill Goldberg versus Scott Steiner. We could call this actually a 2.5-man match because Goldberg is in the match about half of it, selling an injury that he sustained a few nights before. So we see a pretty decent match between Nash and Steiner with a little bit of involvement of Goldberg. Nash picks up the win. Wasn't bad, wasn't the greatest match of all time, but it was fun to watch. And he leads up. Nash is now the number 1 contender, which leads us into the main event for the World Championship. Jeff Jarrett versus Booker T. This was actually probably, along with the ladder match to start the show, the best match of the night. We got two guys that were absolutely hot at the time. Booker T was just starting out to become a main event megastar. Jeff Jarrett had become a main event star. You put the two in there. These were the two guys that were set to go on and lead WCW into the new millennium. Unfortunately, WCW only lasted about a year after this, not even a year. However, you could see where they were going. They were building these two guys to be the stars, along with guys like Steiner, Chronic, and some other guys for the new millennium. And Booker T picks up the win, becomes WCW champion. I believe this was his second run, in a very solid match. Kind of sticks out on the card with a lot of overly gimmick stuff. But again, this is what the problem with Russo booking in WCW was. It was too over gimmicked, too much stuff and too much happening. You put a simple match with two good wrestlers, the fans love it. You put a gimmick that works, like the Awesome and Storm match or the ladder match in the beginning of the show, and the fans enjoy it. You give me crap gimmicks where you have 5 tag teams wrestling and 5 guys refereeing, or the ROTC, basically tits and ass match. It's not so much. That's the problem with Russo. For every great idea he had and every great booking decision he made, which he made some really good ones, and the way he was taking WCW with pushing the younger talent was revolutionary, was refreshing. People were getting tired of seeing the Hulk Hogans of the world. People were getting tired of seeing, and no fault to the guys themselves, the Randy Savages and Ric Flairs being on top. They were ready for the new generation of guys. They were ready for guys like Kidman, like Jeff Jarrett, like Booker T, like the Recount, to come up and start working their way up the roster, which he helped do. However, he also put insane and goofy gimmicks, which drug the company down as well. But anyway, coming from that, we're going to go into our ratings. Now, we have a 1 to 5 scale here. 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. 1's a gobbledygooker, 2's a renegade, 3 is a Hurricane Helms, 4 is a Goldust, and 5 is King. We're going to give the show a 2, a renegade. I enjoyed 2 of the matches. The rest of the show was overly booked, overly gimmicked, overly silly to me, and not in a good way. I had trouble staying up and watching this match, and I watched it in the middle of a day while drinking soda, which should tell you something on how boring it became. But overall, kind of a capsule of what Russo did well as what Russo did bad. Pushing younger talent along with overly gimmicking everything. But that's what it is. Thank you again to Ryan Hadley for suggesting this video. If anybody else wants to make a suggestion, put it down here in the comments. Hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. Let us know what you'd like to see us review. The one caveat would be it has to be able to be found on the network, on the WWE network, and it has to be somewhat bad or goofy or campy to fit in the profile. We'll get to it. Right now we have about 6 or 7 suggestions, so it may be a little while before we get to yours, but we promise we will get to yours. And basically that's all I have to say about WCW's New Blood Rising. My name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of It Came From the Network.